Yeah, just wanted to mention the last, and then our brother here would like to make a comment on the money part, and then any other comments you're welcome to make. I am very conscious of the time boundary needed. We were talking boundaries yesterday, and boundaries with regard to time, especially since I feel like I had, thank you so much, a lot to learn myself about using time well. But then also, once I felt like I was using time well, what did that mean in terms of the people around me, including especially my children? And all 4 of my children were born while I was serving as a pastor. 2 of them were born when I was in my first pastorate. 2 were born when I was in my second pastorate. And furthermore, in both of those cases, I was also not only pastoring, but I was also doing graduate work in linguistics. So I was going to school part-time, but still a fair bit of schooling going on. And so I felt very conscious about a little bit of a tug between things I felt I was responsible to do and needing to pour time. Our children always can use our time, but especially when they're young and in the formative years. I know many or most of you either currently have children or have had children at home. And the same goes as, I don't know about you, but I've found most of us find it, as life goes on, there are more people we have known and more circumstances in which we have served, and therefore the number of sort of contexts, number of places where we could invest ourselves just seems to grow. And feeling like I'm juggling time, I've never found it easy, never. There's no simple formula. I cannot tell you, just do something, and it's magic. Americans love simple answers, and we have to keep reminding ourselves sometimes that there aren't simple answers, but maybe a vigilance and a caution. And part of time management has nothing to do with the clock, believe it or not. Good bit of time, nothing to do with the clock, but it has to do with your conviction about what is most important. Okay? In other words, it's not a fitting in minutes challenge, but it is a priority question. And it's a question that you have to keep asking yourself, and the way you answer it may change as the days and the years progress. Does that make sense? So the way I say it, in this particular slice in my life, here are the things that are most important, and I need to make sure I keep on trying to reach for those, okay? But down the road, maybe some of those get juggled. And I mentioned yesterday or the day before that one of the ways I have been prompted to reevaluate my priorities has been when I have lost a good friend or a family member. One of my responses in grief, it's a painful response, but a good one. Okay, I say to myself, my days are limited. I have so many opportunities to do things. I hope for many more years, but I don't know. I don't know how many I have. If it's even a year, I don't know. So I have to say that what right now are the things that if they're up here, if their importance level is up here, I want to make sure I keep on doing those. And again, that sometimes involves tasks, right? Life has to have tasks, but it also involves people, right? I mean, face-to-face with people. So that's important to me, and I've had a couple of emails or phone calls come into me this week of people who are saying, could we please get together and want to talk about something that's deep on their mind. That's important, all right? But it's people and tasks. And so I just want to encourage you to be vigilant and decide for yourself, what is your priority? And I want to caution you on something, okay? This is very widespread, very human. is sometimes certain tasks are less fun than others. Okay? And when something is less fun, the temptation is to say, oh, I'll put it off till later. All right? I procrastinate. And I want to suggest the opposite. If you have a task that is not much fun, but you know you have to do it, maybe consider doing it first. Interesting. You invert the temptation. And that's one of my management techniques for avoiding procrastination. All right? I take things that I know I have to do them. I don't really want to. They're not fun. Or sometimes it's even, I have to deal with a person on something, and I know it's going to be uncomfortable. And so the temptation is, I'll do it another time. I'll put it off to tomorrow, till next week. I want to suggest, no, bring it forward and grasp it. Bring it forward, grasp it. Get something done that's unpleasant, and then, if you will, you earn the right to go to the more pleasant ones, okay? I'm going to give you one example of this. I believe that when we preach, we should have put time, thoughtful time, into preparing what we're going to say. All right? I think it's important. I know sometimes the spontaneity is good, but sometimes people think to be spontaneous is to be in line with the Spirit. And therefore, if you're not spontaneous, you're not Spirit-driven. That's a false dichotomy. The Spirit uses both spontaneous and planned opportunities. I'll say it again, the Spirit of God uses spontaneous and thoughtfully planned plans, okay? So please don't put the Spirit as an enemy against planning or against involvement and effort. That's a false dichotomy. The Spirit does many, many things of different kinds, and we want to be. So those are just a few thoughts I want to give you. I don't want to go a long time, but I've actually, over the years, because I've been curious, how do I use my time best? I've read a number of books, quite a number of books. In fact, at home, I have an entire 2-hour seminar that I do on time management. And I've given it to students, I've given it to companies as well, where I just talk about how do you manage your time, and I try to give practical guidance on that, because I believe God is generous to us and gives us a lot of time, in like a lot of minutes, a lot of hours. And the question is, most importantly, how do I use those best? How do I use those best? And priority is important. Just before I come to you on the money, the comments you'd like to make, any thoughts on what do you find hardest to deal with in terms of time? Am I giving you something helpful? African time is different than Western time. You know that, right? Yeah. I don't know what's better. I'm just different. It's a different world. But any thoughts? Well, let's go to our brother over here. You're going to make a comment on boundaries of money, yes?
Yeah, I think you made it clear yesterday on money, and it is true sometimes we have servants of God being messed up with finances, and apart from the offerings and the church money, there are other issues of the servant of God relating with members, borrowing money from members. That is an issue that it can potentially destroy the man and so on.
Absolutely.
Somebody said that we should relate upwards, not downwards.
Yeah.
So when we borrow money from members, we're relating downwards, and they can destroy our reputation. A case where I borrow money from a member and I fail to pay, he will not spare me. They will tarnish the name of the servant of God.
Okay.
So in terms of money, it would be fair and good enough if we have any challenge with money, we borrow from maybe somebody outside, or somebody above, maybe a fellow pastor, not a church member.
And well said. Thank you. Thank you. May I make a comment that goes well with that? This is, again, a Western observation, but I'm sure it helps you. It is very, very common in the West for pastors to have money troubles. They just have a lot of struggle, it seems, knowing how to use, what to use. It's a widespread problem even in the West. And we, meaning a lot of us, make an interesting observation in America about poverty, okay? And I hope it doesn't offend, it's an interesting edge, okay? Now we're talking about in America for just a minute, please, so please follow it for the context from which I'm coming. If you have a household that has been struck with financial problems, very often, it is not just a single one-time problem. But if you go back in history, it's one that is, if you will, always there. And professionals who have studied this have said, if you inject a lot of money into a home where, let's say, they've been struggling with finances, it is fairly certain that within a short period of time, they will still have poverty. It's very interesting. Very interesting. Furthermore, studies have been done on people who win American lotteries. You know, this is where you can win large amounts of money by buying little tickets. The tickets are designed, by the way, to keep you poor. This is statistically the way it goes. Lotteries make money for the people who manage the lottery. All right? One lucky person gets to make a lot of money. Everybody else loses money, and their loss pays the guy who won and the company that hosted the lottery. We jokingly say lottery is a tax on those who are bad at math. Okay? It's a tax on those who are bad at math. So it's a bad way to go. Anyway, for most of the time, when there is money challenges, what is desperately needed is not money, but training and help and guidance and ways to go about. I have lived on both sides of this divide, okay? I've lived in my life at points where I barely had enough to get by. I did not starve, but I had very, very little. I've been there for much of my early life especially. And what I did was not simply try to make or get more money, though I've worked diligently at jobs, okay? But I've also read a lot of resources on how to manage what I have. By the way, there's an interesting story Jesus tells. You know the story. A master is going to go away and he gives 3 amounts of money to 3 of his servants. Right? One gets, 5 units of money. One of them gets 2 units of money. One of them gets 1. The master doesn't really trust the third guy, right? And the first person manages it well. The second person also manages it well. And the third person really doesn't. And it's interesting because I think Jesus is drawing from an experience that is probably true across all societies. Some people have figured out and learned how to best manage, whether they have a lot or they have a little, they've learned how to manage it well. And others haven't, and those that haven't sometimes are hungry for handouts. And we want to trade. By the way, the beauty of the internet these days, if you don't have money to buy books, that's okay. There's a lot of good resources online that are free. Maybe lectures people do on YouTube, articles that'll help. I read. I just pulled ideas. I thought, I can live a slightly freer life. But I had to train myself. I had to learn. And I want to encourage, especially pastors. We're in a vulnerable position. So. All right. One last opportunity. If anyone would like, yes, absolutely. Let me get this back to you. And we'd love to hear what you'd like to offer. Thank you.
Thank you. I think mine falls on the subject matter. in terms of when a pastor of either gender is going through marital challenges, it's not advisable for them to share their marital challenges with a member or a person of the opposite gender. Like, for example, I've seen a pastor sharing his marital issues with the women's ministry leader. And at the end of the day, there is going to be compromise between the two of them.
I do. That's a great question. Broadly, really, how much of a pastor's personal problems should be shared with the congregation and in what setting? If the pastor does that, in what setting? I'm going to suggest two things. Okay, two things. First thing I'm going to suggest: people need to know that pastors are human beings with troubles. They need to know that, right? And I'll tell you a funny little, this is true, this is my church about 15 years ago. There was a little boy in the church, and he was, I think maybe 3-4 years old, okay? And one day, and he was used to seeing me up in front of the church, preaching, okay? And one day I had a guest preacher come in, and the guest preacher was preaching, and I was sitting in the pew, just kind of in front of where this little boy was sitting with his family, okay? And the little boy, I discovered later, turns to his mommy, and he says, "Mommy, why is God sitting in the pew?" So, anyway, now, as a little kid, it was kind of cute. I once was very straightforward when I was counseling an older teenager, and I don't remember what specifically I shared of my struggles, and he was very much helped. He said, in all honesty, he said, "I didn't know pastors had problems like me." All right? So I'm going to get one more story for you. I was going through a period of great difficulty in my personal life, and a young couple who had graduated from a college and had gotten engaged came to me and said, "We'd like to ask if you would officiate at our wedding, and would you do the premarital counseling for us?" Okay, I was on. They're a lovely couple. Lots of great stories here, but I won't go into them. Anyway, I was feeling very vulnerable. Okay, I didn't tell them why. I just was feeling very vulnerable. Maybe they knew, maybe they didn't. I don't know. And I said to them, because I knew they were from two very strong Christian families. I knew their families, they're wonderful families. And I said, "Are you sure you want to be coming to me for your premarital counseling?" And with a twinkle in her eye, she was smiling, it was lovely, she said, "My mother always taught me never trust a pastor without a limp." Perfect. I said, "Well, so long as you're okay with my limp, I'll give you whatever I can give you." Okay? So I'm going to start by saying we have to allow some degree of acknowledgement of our humanness. Otherwise, we're not being fair, we're not being honest, we're not being true to people. You know, I want to draw something from the book of Hebrews, which captures the Old Testament. And it makes this note in the book of Hebrews about priests, Old Testament priests. And it says, when a priest goes to offer sacrifices for sins, he first offers them for his own sins. And then he does it for the sins of the people. That's exactly right. And if we believe our ministry, if I believe I have a ministry that's good for you and you and you, does that not mean I also need it? Sure it does. Of course it does. So allowing sight to our shortcomings, very important. Okay, now, having said that, I'm going to talk about the other side. All right? You need to be extremely careful how you share, where you share, what you share, and with whom. You must. You absolutely must. And also, there is occasionally, I've had this experience occasionally, there is someone who is what I call is on a fishing expedition. They're looking to find and collect notes on my faults. You've had the same experience, I can tell, by the reactions you have here. Reality. So here's how I've done it productively, because I do want to share my happy but also my difficult days. I have in my mind a very small list of people that I share almost anything with. Okay? Most of them are, there's a couple, I know some women who are just very wise, mature, thoughtful, considerate women, and I share some things with them because I know they're going to treat it well. Okay? I know some men that, by the way, some men that once I thought I could really lean on, and I discovered they weren't nearly as reliable as I thought they were. That's not the end of the world. I keep on going. But there are also men who are just rock solid. And if I say to them, please, can we talk about this challenge, this problem that is troubling me right now, I know that when I go to them, first, they're going to listen carefully. Right? If a person cannot listen carefully and patiently, then I don't have time and they don't have time. If a person can listen patiently, and then I need someone who will talk honestly with me, because maybe I have a blind spot. Maybe the problem that I'm in, I'm a contributor to the problem. Right? Because I'm flawed. So I need someone who's a thoughtful, if you will, critic, or at least an honest respondent. But thirdly, I need someone whose life has demonstrated that when somebody entrusts something to them, they will be respectful of it. And I'm not criticizing Africans, but I'm going to tell you what a lot of Kenyans have told me in past years. What I think some of you are saying right now is sometimes people entrust their problems, and then the pastor says, well, let's pray for so-and-so, and ends up divulging private things that should not be divulged about other people. All right? And I'm saying we should not do that about other people. We must be very, very cautious about to whom we are willing and where we're willing to talk about. So we have, some issues are simple, some are complex, some are very deep and dark. And you've got to figure out where this stuff is, and then the where it falls will lead to whom may I share it. Is that helpful? Okay, thank you. That's a big issue. Thoughts again, please.
I think I have a seventh one to add.
Okay, please. Yes.
Thinking about friendship as a barrier.
Do you want to comment more on that?
Yeah, when I came with that point in my thinking, I thought maybe as a counselor or as a pastor, you need to choose your friends well, not to compromise your dignity or someone's dignity.
Yeah.
As in, people can be different, and the types of friends as a minister you would choose, they would matter to your ministry, either positively or negatively. For instance, in case you're a male servant and you choose a friend who is a female servant who is not married, you need to be extra cautious or careful, because that one could compromise your dignity.
That's right. Can I add to what you just said? I agree. I think there's also different levels of friendship. So deep friendship with a person is a little bit different from what I would call a casual friendship. Right? Here's an observation about Christians in general, which goes to this point. Observation of the longer a person is a Christian, the larger their circle of Christian friends is, and very often the smaller their circle of non-Christian friends. There's a good side and a bad side to that. The good side is we may be around people who are more encouraging and supportive. of us and us to them. However, it means Christians can easily become isolated within their own communities and neglect to be salt and light. So I just add, it's not to disagree, but just to add that to the picture. Thank you. Thought? I'll take the microphone and pass it to our brother here.
Okay, I want to talk about the money that came back from accountability. Okay, I want to talk about the accountability. The way the church money is being used. You know, sometimes how the servants of God use money, you can ask them and they cannot give you, they are not transparent. Another thing about seeds in church, about planting seeds, whereby it has bring a lot of issue, but people are just being trained by want to do something and want to plant seeds of such kind of manner. Sometimes most of members have been trained planting seed, so it has been an issue in our churches. How can we handle such an issue?
So can you elaborate, are you talking about money at this point, or could you just talk a little bit more about the comments?
Yes, that, and I'm talking about being accountable.
Accountable,
The
right.
way the resources of the church has been used, how the money is being used.
Okay, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
that transparency.
Again, I could talk about that.
How do we have any plan about because sometimes you can ask for accountability that the money of the church, how it has been used, and you cannot get that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. That's a great question. So accountability with respect to, particularly to church monies. Okay. I have a couple thoughts. I hope they're helpful. And there's going to be an edge to the challenge here. So in the churches that I have worked with mostly, we are Presbyterian, which means we are part of a collection or network of churches. And money accountability happens both in the congregation, but also to the collection of churches, the association, or what we call presbytery. So there are not only, so for example, here are the levels. Money is collected, offerings are collected. We say 2 people count the money together, right? And they're not related. They're not related. They're not husband and wife, brother, sister, father, mother, none of that kind of stuff. They have to be 2 unrelated people. They count the money, and immediately after the counting of the money from the collection, they report to the elders of the church, this is what was collected today, and the elders can expect this money gets deposited in the bank. That's one level of accountability. It's within the congregation. You can do however you want to do that. I urge you to do that and not leave it to one person. It's a temptation. Then there's a second level of accountability, okay? And that is that the association, we call the presbytery, then has churches report once or twice a year in terms of what monies have come in and what expenses are going out. Not every detail, but a big picture, so that other eyes are on it. If your church is an independent church, and many in America are, and many in Kenya are as well, maybe one of the ways to do that is not only have the people within the congregation checking the money, but maybe go into an agreement with another congregation. They review your records, you review their records. I'm just putting out an idea. How you do it is something you have to figure out. It depends how much protection you want in the area of accountability. Some people want a lot of accountability. Some people are trying to avoid it, okay? So you can figure out the pattern of your church's leadership or your pattern by how many eyes are looking at our records. So you get to decide that. I think it's very important because people are people, right? On a good day, we're following Jesus. And some days we don't. Any of us, we're all sinners. Every one of us is. And for some people, certain kinds of sins are a greater vulnerability. Right? Not everybody is vulnerable to financial sins, but some are, okay? This is a way to help people. Those are just a couple of thoughts. I think accountability is very important, and I think independent churches are at risk. By the way, I'm a member of a Presbyterian church with a lot of accountability, but I'm also serving as a part-time pastoral worker in an independent church. So please, I'm not judging you. I'm doing both, okay? And the way the independent church does it is they have multiple people involved. There's at least one, two, I can count at least 4 people who every week have their eyes on monies going in, going out, how it's used. This is good. This is good. And I believe they sometimes have an outside auditor come and look at their records to make sure these things are being done as they should. We want to avoid sin, and we want to avoid giving bad impressions. Other thoughts on the boundaries part? Well, we're still on it.
Just
Yeah.
time. On time.
Time.
Yes. There should be a set time on when you're doing counseling, not very late,
Yep.
not very early in the morning.
Yep.
There should be set time.
I think that's helpful.
Yeah.
A set and in a place that's somewhat public, where other people are coming and going.
There are cases where maybe members will go very late in the night,
Yep.
unless it is a matter of life and death.
I agree. Please, back to Brother.
Just on time, we pastors should be good time managers in all the church activities, and more to at the time when we are preaching. You may preach for 2 hours, 5 good hours. So we should be very good time managers in the church activities.
Okay. I have a couple thoughts on that. And yes, I have to admit, Westerners are very different from Africans when it comes to that. By the way, about a little over 3 years ago, I was over in Pakistan with a team visiting churches over in Pakistan, and I was invited to preach at a large church, about 500 people in this church, and I just go with the flow. I wait till, I'm told to come up and talk, and there's translation for it. Anyway, the church wasn't very full, and the worship started, I had started at 10 o'clock, and about 10:30, 10:45, 11 o'clock, there was singing, and there was testimonies reading, and more people came in, and more people came in, and it went 11, 11:30, 12 o'clock, okay, more, it's kind of African almost, and more people came in, and I don't think I started preaching until 2.5 hours after the church had started, and then I preached for about 20 minutes. Okay? Now, you have to figure out for your culture what's your good length of time, and I don't know what that is. I'm going to tell you what I do, and many Americans feel this is too short. So please know this. Not every American agrees with me. Not every American agrees. But I believe that a good time for me to preach is a little under, just around 25 minutes. Okay? Furthermore, I give an outline, a printed outline of my sermon. Every week I preach at a church. I give a printed outline. They have an outline of my notes, okay? That they can ignore them or they can use them. And I say what I want to say. I try to go slow. I try to be clear. I try to be enjoyable and engaging. And then I stop. Here's a principle that may be helpful. It doesn't tell you minutes. It tells you an idea. And I heard this from a man who shaped me very much. He said, always with a smile on his face, he said, the mind can absorb what the seat can endure. Like that. The mind can absorb what the seat can endure. And I know many, many congregations who are very good at participating and listening to and learning from long sermons. Good. Do what you need to do. And I know many congregations where people are not good at it. And furthermore, let me just add, because it's not just, it is a matter of time, definitely, but there's also, what kind of preaching do you do? There's different kinds of preaching, different ways to go about opening God's Word, and different churches need a different style of preaching because of the nature of the people that are in the church. So being aware of time and so forth. Caution to ministers, time moves faster than you think when you are up front, but it moves very slow from the point of view of the pew. It does. It does. Now, I will say this. Your culture is more oral than American culture. American culture is more written. Oral cultures can stand to go longer. Written cultures do better, slightly shorter. Okay? I'm not giving you a law. I'm not giving you numbers. I'm giving you principles. Right? So I would say be thoughtful and considerate of your people. And you know, one easy way to go is talk to your people. I like to ask my people, I just say, how did it go today? Did we connect? Did it make sense? Is it something you can live by? They'll give me feedback anyway. Well, I would ask you people. These are good questions. These really are. And there's not one right answer. Just back here, and I'll come to you next, okay? 1, 2, 3. Got it. Okay.
Thank you. I want to take us back on the aspect of time. There's something you were almost sharing, and we redirected you to another question. You're talking about procrastination and how to prioritize. Maybe you can just give a few highlights. You talked about the training that you did on time management. Please quickly go back there so that we also get some insights from it.
I'll give you a couple thoughts. I'll be glad to. I can do it concisely, short amount of time. So I'm going to give this to you to hold, but don't say anything just yet. Okay? Yeah, I can tell you a couple things that are very, very helpful. And it's not, I read these in books, but then I tried them out. One of them I've already given you is if there is a task you don't want to do it first. Very simple. The task you don't want to do it first. Here's a second thought. Get to know yourself and when you are sharpest mentally. Okay, I'll give you some examples. Get to know when you are sharpest mentally. Some of you, when you wake up in the morning, you wake up and you are ready to take over the world. I am not one of those people. My roommate in college used to say, when I woke up in the morning, I looked like a bear who crawled out of his cave at the end of winter. That's how I felt, too. I just wake up very slowly. Early morning is a horrible time for me to do anything thoughtful. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't pray well early in the morning. I am simply struggling to move. That's me, okay? So, I am not going to do tasks that demand my thinking early. But I'll do it like early in the morning, I'll wash the dishes. Early in the morning, I'll wash my clothes. Early in the morning, I will organize something because it doesn't take a lot of mental energy, all right? I wake up, like really awake. Actually, at a typical morning, right about now, getting close to 10 o'clock, is when I'm most mentally awake. Now, flip side, I'm going to tell you the worst time, and studies have shown this is for most cultures around the world, the time right after lunch is mentally the slowest time for many people around the world. You've had a meal, you felt good, and then, as one of my friends calls it, food coma sets in. Yeah, you know. And we're slow. So 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, maybe even 3 o'clock. We're just a little bit slower, and then many of us pick up in the afternoon, and others of us don't really come back fully awake until the evenings. So figure out for you the best times in the day to do different kinds of tasks. All right? One more thought. I don't know about you and your memory. I'm going to compare myself to Dr. Starelli because we've made observations on this. She has a very good oral memory, meaning when she hears something, particularly if it's in a conversation, she has a phenomenal memory for that. That just seems to be glued into her mind. Months, even years later, she can remember the exact words someone was speaking in a conversation. That's amazing. My best memory is what I can see and what I write. Okay? So, I easily forget things that I hear which could make me disorganized and time-wasting. So, I do what many other people do is I have little notes. Okay? And I have a calendar. I have a one-year calendar so I can fit in my pocket, what I call a little daytime, month by month. I have schedules. I have little notes and sticky notes I stick in there to remind myself things I need to do. And many people find that is very, very helpful. Okay? How about if I stop at just those suggestions? And we talked earlier about having priorities, being aware of what's really most important. I'll say that much, and I hope that's helpful. But I'm trying to think if one of my time seminars is on, I don't know how to look on this. It might or might not be on YouTube. I might have had one of these posted, but I love doing a time seminar because people can work practically with it. Anyway, we had a man over here with comments.
Yes, mine is on time.
Time also, okay.
How long a pastor can he select leaders in the church? Because we're in a hurry and we fail many blunders. So for how long can a pastor select some leaders?
Some leaders? Yes, because the ministry has to be shared, doesn't it? We do not have time for all, and it has to be done. By the way, there's a lovely example in Old Testament. Moses, as a leader of Israel, trying to adjudicate law cases, and his father-in-law comes to him and says, "You can't do this on your own. Choose elders to work with you." We have a lovely example of that from Moses, by the way. So how do you choose? That's a great question. I would say I simply watch people for a few years, quite a long time. Sometimes I get a quick impression that someone's very good at something. I might be right, but sometimes people are only really dependable for a while, but then they quickly drop off. And so I like to watch people across a period of time, not only for are they faithful users of their own resources and gifts, but also can they do it with a certain consistency and not looking for what gifts do they have. Because some people really good over here with these kinds of things and others more here. That's at least a first round thought on working or choosing people to work with me. And then I try to give them both resources in print, but also training with me. Go and do things with me. Come and visit somebody in the hospital with me. Come and join me and counsel someone with me. All right? So I like to be side by side with people as one of the best ways to train. Those are some thoughts. You had some thoughts. Wasn't it you? It wasn't. Was it okay? Not so simple, huh?
Oh, I wanted to comment on what say
Oh, okay.
preaching.
Okay.
I think what should guide a preacher is this. We preach an everlasting gospel, but we don't preach an everlasting sermon. Yeah.
Well said. That's well said. Can I say it one more time? We preach an everlasting gospel, but we don't always preach an everlasting sermon. What was Jesus' technique, by the way? If you think about Jesus' roughly 3 to 4 years, Jesus preached publicly. Most of his preaching was outside of a place of worship. Some of it was done in synagogues, but some of it was done on the hillside, on the seaside, in the streets. And he uses a lot of storytelling and metaphors, right? His theme is always the kingdom of God. And he's always saying, the kingdom of God is like such and such. There's a lot of that. And maybe that's helped to us. I have learned over the years to tell more stories that illustrate truths. Because when you tell a story or you give a metaphor, something visual takes place in the memory. Americans have the same challenge. I'm interested that you say that from an African point of view. I didn't realize that. I know it's an American problem. But that's interesting. Okay, thank you. Last opportunity on this before I transition to the new subject. We okay here? Okay. Then give me just a second to erase the board. And I want to tell you a couple of stories to illustrate. This happens to be a topic that I like to talk about in counseling anyway, and then it came up on the list that someone mentioned the other day, and so I want to talk about it with you. But I want to talk about it very cautiously. Actually, let me get rid of this. I don't need this microphone here. I want to talk about it cautiously because it's the nature of the subject is it lends itself to people getting awfully excited, and sometimes it's an excitement without wisdom. I want to approach this wisely. A couple of short stories first, if I may. So I spent, I think I spent 32 or 33 years working with the mission board of the denomination I work with, and the work that I did with it took me to a couple of different countries. I was in Cyprus, which is in the eastern Mediterranean over near Egypt and Israel. I was there a number of times. We had a mission involvement there. I had been just a few years ago in Pakistan. I did quite a number of trips to Japan, some to China, and some other places. And so I was in very, very different cultures. And one of the things that I noted, particularly in Asian cultures, is I was hearing more stories about, we'll just say broadly, that involve demonic issues. Okay, I want to be broad here. You'll see why I'm being broad in a minute, okay? In other words, stories involving people who were saying or were believed to have some kind of, we'll just say, demon involvement, okay? And in the middle of it all, someone gave me a book which I found very interesting and helpful to me, okay? Because I take the Bible at face value, particularly the Gospels, and I read stories about reference to demons. Jesus talks occasionally about demons. Other people talk about demons doing some kind of activity or another, causing illness or injury or whatever, affecting people's motivations. I believe there is a spirit world that involves not God, not human beings, but broadly some other kind of beings that are there, that are I believe in angels, right? And I believe in demons, basically fallen messengers of God, so sinful messengers of God. I believe it's true because the Bible seems to describe it as a real thing and a real event. Anyway, someone gave me a book that was from the 19th century, a very old book, almost now 200 years old, by a Western missionary named John Nevius, okay? N-E-V-I-U-S. I don't expect the name to mean anything to you. John Nevius was a Western missionary to China in the 1800s. China has always had an interest to me because briefly as a boy, I lived in Hong Kong, okay? Which is a strange story in itself. I'm going to keep moving here. And later in life, my family discovered that my ancestry, which goes through Australia, actually traces back to China. Okay? I don't look Asian, but genetically, I'm a little bit Asian because of the Chinese ancestry on my dad's side. And our family name right now is Watt, W-A-T-T. The family name was originally Guo, and it was spelled something like G-U-O, and then it went through changes and became Watt, okay? So I've always had an interest in Asia for a number of reasons. Anyway, John Nevius in the 1800s goes over to Asia, spends 40 years ministering there, and comes back and he writes a book. And the book is called Demon Possession and Allied Themes. And he tells stories. And the stories include his own way of seeing. And he said, when I first went over to China, I didn't really believe in demon stuff. Okay? And then he said, here's what happened that caught his attention. Chinese people were relating to him certain events and experiences. And they were, you know, about demonic activity. Okay? And he was saying to himself, you know, there are similar kinds of stories in the Bible, but these people don't know the Bible. They're telling these stories independently of what the Bible says, because they haven't been introduced yet to the Bible. And that draws his attention. So over the years, he cautiously collects accounts that people have given about real or imagined demonic activity, and this goes into his book that I read. I've got a copy of it. It's a fascinating book. And so that stuck with me. Then, here's what happened. Some years ago, a relative of mine called me up and said, it's a woman, she was a married woman in her 30s, and she said, I'm having strange events happen in my house. Now, I happen to know this particular relative was a very emotional person. And I was respectful as we talked on the phone, and I thought to myself, I don't know if I really believe what she's saying, but I also need to show her respect. And so later on, we invited her family to our home. We lived some hours away, and they stayed the week at our home. And believe it or not, the kinds of weird activities that were happening in her home happened the week she was staying with us. I thought, okay, she wasn't making this up. These are weird things. Moving forward, and I'm going to get very practical in just a minute here. Moving forward, I had a student, one of a number of students, who were dear to me. They were my undergraduate students, and I could tell in the way I talked with them, I could just see there were strange things happening in their minds, okay? And I decided, for reasons I'll explain in just a minute, that just maybe there was something evil, demonic going on in their life. Now I'm going to get narrowed to two stories. A young son of a pastor, who was a young adult male, came to me one day and he said, I need your help. I'm demon possessed. This is what he said. He said, I'm demon possessed. I said, okay, why are you saying that? And he goes on to explain a number of weird behaviors that he was doing in his sleep. Okay? And he didn't remember them when he woke up, but other people described the strange and hurtful things he had done while he was asleep. And he said to me, he said, I'm demon possessed. I said, I don't know if you are or not. I said, you've had a lot of family members who have had mental illness, right? They've got some kind of an organic illness that makes them do strange things, and even he's had relatives who had suicided as well. Okay? I'm not saying suicides are always demonic. I'm just saying sometimes there may be a connection. That's what I'm saying. So I said to him, I'm not sure you're demon possessed. Maybe you need medical care. He said, no, I'm convinced it's a demon issue. So we had an agreement. Okay, this is me. This is the way it worked out. He said, you know, I'm really convinced this is the problem. I said, I'll tell you what. I said, he wanted me to have a service of exorcism. That's what he wanted. And I said, I don't really do that. You don't pay me enough to do that. I didn't say that. But that's what I said. And I said, I tell you what, here's the deal. Here's the deal. I want you to choose, you know, me and 3 other men who you know, who you respect, and we will get together with you and we're going to pray. And we'll pray a long time if we need to pray. Okay? We'll pray a long time. But here's the agreement you have to agree with me to begin with. If, when we pray, you are freed from the problem that you have, we will celebrate together and you will be right. We saw you freed from demonic activity. If, however, after we have prayed a long time, you are not you know, you're still having these problems, you have to come with me to see a psychiatrist. And then be agreeable to take medication to deal with whatever might be going on. And he said, agreed. It was a good agreement. So it chose the 3 other people, and the 4 of us got together, and we spent an afternoon together. And I'll tell you exactly what we did. This young man had military training. He was very strong, very fit. And of course, being in the military, he was trained to be deadly. He wasn't a threat to us, but I'm just saying this was his training. So we sat him on a chair in the office of one of my friends, and I sat on one shoulder, just behind one of his shoulders, and another friend sat behind another shoulder, and then the 2 friends sat in front of him, so his knees were always bent. We kept him seated, okay? And we prayed. And we prayed for maybe half an hour, just quietly. We weren't making a lot of noise. Well, no fanfare. No fanfare. Just we quietly prayed, and I would say, I don't know, nothing really happened until about an hour into the prayer. And about an hour into the prayer, he started to get very restless. And you could hear him groaning and grunting, and you could just tell there was something inside going on. And we continued to pray for another hour, okay? And you know, to me, 2 hours of prayer, that's a long prayer time, okay? All right, I get it. And it was only after about 2 hours of prayer, his yearning finally stopped, and he just relaxed, and he went limp, and we made sure he didn't get up for those 2 hours. And he went relaxed, and we brought the prayer to a close time. He looked around at all this, and he said, I haven't felt this good in 5 years. That was the end of it. Literally, that was the end of it. And he has since gone on to get married. He's worked a public security job, which fits his military training. And as far as we can tell, he was freed from whatever kind of trouble was in. Okay. Now I'm going to tell you one more story, and then I'm going to tell you what I take from it, and then I'll invite your comments. Okay. But I want to tell you one more story. A handful of years ago, a number of my students on campus said to me, have you met a student named such and such? She's a young woman. She's around 19, 20 years old. And these are my students that were speaking to me. They said, she's demon-possessed. And I said, okay. I want you to know something. Whenever someone says that to me, I'm very hesitant. I don't like to hear that phrase. I'll explain why in a minute. But I also want to respect when someone says to me, or many people say to me, we think such and such is the case. I owe it to them respectfully to listen. And I said, why do you think this fellow students, they described certain odd behaviors of hers. I said, okay, I'm thinking to myself, maybe mental illness, maybe some organic mental illness, I don't know what, but that's what my first thought was. And then the unexpected happened one afternoon. My office at the time was sort of next to a very busy hallway in one of the buildings on campus. And this particular student was having a very, very bad day. And an older Christian student basically, in a loving way, grabbed the woman, the younger one who was not well, and simply brought her into my office. No warning. Just said, she's here. This is the gal we're talking about. And we sat her down. And I said, okay, let's talk. And what proceeded was a weird conversation. So I'm sitting, I don't know, maybe 5 feet in front of the young woman. A young woman, friend of hers, is on one side, another one is on the other. I had another faculty member in with me, and it was a very strange. We sort of conversed, and we sort of did, and she kept on sort of looking up this way and this way. I thought, what are you looking at? It was a very strange conversation, and I said, I learned this from her. I said, people tell me you struggle with things that are spiritual, dark spiritual things. And she said, yes. She said, when I was a young teenager, my father died of cancer. And I made a deal with the devil. And the deal was, I will worship you if you will let me talk to my father. So a few years prior, she had pursued evil stuff. By the way, the first fellow I told you about had done something quite similar. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because I don't usually encounter people saying, hey, I want to make a deal with the devil. But this is what she said. Now remember, I'm a skeptical person much of the time. I really am. And the reason I'm skeptical is even in America, it's certainly true in Africa, but even in America, people almost thrive on weirdness. Right? If there's a weird story, if there's something fantastic and explosive and bizarre, they love it. They love to make up stories about it. And I've learned not to trust people. No offense, but I've learned not to trust people. And I've learned, especially in areas where they're talking demonic stuff, it lends itself to sort of, just a lot of what my uncles calls froth and bubble. All right? And I don't like it. I don't like it. Anyway, so here's this young woman in front of me, and I could tell there is something weird going on. Now, this is a slightly different story. For the next few hours, there were about 3 or 4 of us praying with this woman, and this got weird because she started to utter things in another voice that wasn't her voice. It was very strange. All right? And then, what was also interesting, the same kind of wrestling, physical wrestling with herself was going on, and her female friends who were holding her tight, okay, later on showed me all the bruises they had on their arms and shoulders because this gal had been gripping them and wrestling with them. And so we prayed for quite a while. The heat that kind of came out of her body, and we could just feel the heat and the sounds and everything. We thought, this is weird. We prayed for a few hours. Things quieted down for a while, okay? And she said thank you, and all of us had this sense, this isn't over yet, okay? And it wasn't. And the following week, more weird stuff happened. The following week, more weird stuff, but except I wasn't there for it. However, beautifully enough, some of my student friends were with her, and not with me present, but a few weeks later, had another lengthy prayer time with her, and she was freed of it. That young woman is now married and with children, and living, as far as I know, a fairly free life. Now, here's a couple things I want to put on the board. I know that most of us have heard the term, and maybe used the term, I just abbreviated, demonic possession. I'm going to suggest a better term, okay? And it's one that refuses to be sensationalized, okay? And it's a suggestion of a couple theologians who said, instead, could we talk about demonization? Meaning, someone is somehow affected by the world of evil, but that does not mean that the person is owned by it, especially if they're a believer. And I'm going to use an example from the Bible that I think affirms this preference, okay? It's the story of the man named Legion. And Jesus encounters him, and he's on the east side of Lake Galilee. By the way, Jews lived to the north and the west and the south, but the east side, while it did have Jewish communities, had a lot of pagan communities as well. Okay? By the way, there are Jews, and we're talking about the Bible here, there are Jews who were demon-troubled, but it seemed especially prevalent in the non-Jewish world. So here comes this guy. Jesus says, what's your name? You know the story. My name is Legion, because we're many, meaning much demonic trouble. All right? So that's what he says. All right? Is he correct in understanding himself? Maybe, but that's what he says. All right. Now, here's what we know. Observe. His interaction with Jesus, he has a degree of control of his mind and his speech, because he's having a conversation with Jesus. But it is a strange conversation. Okay? And furthermore, the Gospels describe this behavior at this particular moment. He's conversing with Jesus, but at other times he would live in caves, almost like a wild animal, and he would attack people. And they would try and tie him up or chain him, and he was so strong he could bust apart what was tying him up, and then he'd attack people. But this was only intermittently. Okay? So he was not demon-possessed, but he was demon or demonically troubled. There's a difference. all right? And we have to remember, we are at the mercy of people talking about themselves and Jesus relating things in the words and the verbiage of his day. There's a lot about the spirit world we do not understand. And we ought to be careful not to pretend that we somehow know everything that's going on in the world outside. We know the physical world because we live here, right? But we are not friends, close friends anyway, with particular angels or any other creature God has made. So I like this idea of demonization, okay? And a few years later, after these stories I was telling you about, there was a delegation of Ugandan pastors who visited our college. And I had lunch with these. Now, they would have been for some reason, I don't remember what it was. And we were having a wonderful lunch and fellowship time together. They were pastors, professors, psychologists, and then a lovely mix of Ugandan leaders. And I said to them, I have a question for you. I said, how do you tell the difference when you're dealing with someone whose behavior is strange, and you say to yourself, I could be looking at demonic activity, or I could be looking at someone where there is an organic unwellness in their brain. There's chemical problems of such a severe degree in their brain that they're acting weird. I'll take as one example. I have some friends who are paranoid schizophrenia, okay, that's what it's called. And I'm thinking of one in particular. She sees people who don't exist, but she sees them and talks with them. So I used to say, when I'm driving over to your house, I see certain people. She points out the window to various trees in the street where I used to live. She says, I see people in different trees, sitting in the trees and talking to me as I come to your house. Now, that's interesting, okay? She says, I know they're not real, but I see them and they talk to me. Okay, that's not demon possession. She has an organic illness, right? And she has other issues along with it. By the way, she says, I like to come into your house with your kids because there are no fake people in your house. This is not demon stuff. This is organic illness. So I said to the Ugandan people, I said, how do you tell the difference between someone who has severe organic illnesses of some kind or another, or that there's something demonic? And they laughed. They actually laughed at me. And they said, when you get the answer to this question, you tell us. That's still wrong. I thought the Africans had the answer. Okay. Yes.
So in this case now you're talking of someone controlled by the demons.
Yes.
But
not owned. In other words, they're heavily influenced. I'm talking about Legion, the man Legion that Jesus interacts with. Remember that story? He's heavily influenced by demons, but he is not owned entirely by demons. That makes sense? They're troubling him. They're causing great difficulty, even violence. But he still has a degree of able to control his thinking and to interact.
So, by the fact that he is troubled by the demons, does it not mean that they have a residence in him?
They at least are very close by. That's correct. That's correct. Maybe residence is not as bad, but remember, I can live in a house, but it does not mean I control the whole house. It just means I live there.
But you have a portion.
I have a portion. That's it. That's it. They have a portion of it. Let's go with that. A portion. But then there's other people, there's not demonic issues, but their brain is sick. It's an unhealthy brain. It's not working right. Anyway, so I said to the Ugandan guy, I said, what's Uganda? They said, we don't know. I said, I've got actually a suggestion. And it's based on the limited experience that I've had, that I've described. I have some more stories, but I gave you just a couple, okay? And my thought is this. When I look at someone or even sit down with someone, there is so much I don't know. And I don't want to pretend that I know what I don't know, okay? But here's this. If I, or a group of people, pray and pray and pray, and someone is released from these troubles, it appears to me we have seen God drive out demons. I don't drive out demons. God does that. That's God's work. I can ask God to do that. I do not have the power to tell a demon what to do. I just don't. Never have. But I can pray to God, would he free this man or this woman from whatever it is that's troubling them. And if they are freed, beautiful. We'll celebrate together. But my understanding is if these problems continue again and again and year after year, and faithful people are asking for freedom, then I want to say to that brother or sister, please, let's go to a psychiatrist together and see if some kind of medication might not help you. And go from there. So I take a kind of an experimental approach to lots of things, including this one. So anyway, thoughts, interactions. My goal is I don't want to be sensational about any of this stuff. There's so much I don't know. I know just a little. Let me get you a microphone and we'll welcome what you have to say here.
Thank you. I agree with you concerning the matter. And that is the term that is mostly used for people of that kind, that we say he, she is demon possessed. But in this case, in this sense, I agree with you that it's more of being maybe controlled or under the influence of demons. But then as you were saying, I could be right or wrong, but I'm thinking there are some few instances of actual demon possession in this manner. This thing is not spoken much about, but it is a reality. It is there nowadays, where people make an agreement with the devil, and they literally sell their souls to the devil. Literally, even though it is not much spoken about, but it is there. And such people, it's rare to see them act weird like we see. They have other activities that are of higher realm, but not simply beings that we see, people that we call demon possessed. Those people are of a higher level of demonization that is not merely what we see with people we say they are demon possessed. So I'm just saying about such people who have literally sold their souls to the devil. Because initially, everyone belongs to God. Because God is the creator of everything. So we cannot, it is somehow awkward to say someone is demon possessed. But what about this case where someone has literally sold his or her soul to the devil?
I'm open. Point taken. I'm open. Point taken. Thank you very much. Point taken. Yep. Other thoughts? Can we send the microphone back, please?
Mine is just want to find out, I heard of people talk of sleepwalking. Someone is asleep and then they wake up in the middle of the night, they're not aware, they even start doing something. Is that a chemical problem, the brain, or is
Great question. Great question. So sleepwalking. First off, there are mechanisms, biological mechanisms that very, very, very often explain sleepwalking. And now I'm not a professional at this, so I'm going to do it in a layman's way. Okay, when you are asleep, and you're in the right sleep cycle, your brain dreams. Okay, your brain has thoughts, and the thoughts digest whatever went on that day. Right? So, for example, some of the dreams we have are involving real people we know, conversations we've had, things we've done, perhaps from that day, and our brain is replaying them, and sometimes doing it in a weird fashion because we're not guiding our thoughts, they're just playing out. If we are under great anxiety, sometimes we have dreams where scary things happen. They often indicate we are under great tension. Now, here's the mechanism. The brain has this interesting way of being able to allow you to think things and to think actions, but it suppresses the actual movements. And that's the way the brain is designed. So the brain can think and act, but prevent the body from acting. which is good. That's why we can stay in bed and sleep. However, if there's something that interrupts the suppressing factor of the body while asleep, that is what leads some people, on occasions, to be sleep. By the way, sleepwalking, can I add one more? To young children who have had too busy a day, they have a similar kind of thing where you can't tell if they're awake or asleep, and they're screaming and they're moving around. It's similar. So I want to be very clear, the vast majority of sleepwalking is simply the chemistry is not quite working as needed in the brain. I don't see it as demonic activity. So, thoughts here?
I'm going to get into sleep just a little wee bit because we'll cover it more next week with trauma theology class. But essentially, there are a lot of different what are called sleep-wake disorders. Okay? And let's step back before we get to that part, is that there are 3 types of sleep that we have. There's REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep. Okay, and that's when our brain processes the things that happen during the day. Okay? In a way, it's helping heal or decompress our brain. Okay? So if we have short sleeps or naps, or sleep that's not uninterrupted, and we don't get in 2 to 3 REM cycles, we're going to have problems with our cognitions. We're going to be a little disoriented. We're going to be more likely to just not be thinking clearly. Okay? We're going to be more emotional. Okay? And likewise, deep sleep, okay, is the second type of sleep. And that's when our body heals. Okay? So when we're physically not well, or we need to rest, or if you're like me, you're getting older and your joints ache, that deep sleep is when your body is repairing itself. Light sleep is the transition between REM sleep and being awake and deep sleep. So you'll go through these cycles of sleep throughout your night. Okay? So you'll be in light sleep, and then you might go to a REM, and then you might go to a light sleep again, you go to a deep sleep, okay? And so whenever we are having particularly difficult times, where something is troubling us, it will show up in our sleep. Vice versa, if we can indicate sometimes a depressive episode because you'll have disrupted sleep about 1 to 2 months before the depressive episode starts. Okay? So when I say to you that sleep is extremely important to your well-being, it's extremely important to your physical well-being, it's extremely important to your mental health. Okay? And so when we're not getting enough sleep, when we're not getting enough rest, when we're getting interrupted sleep, okay, those things can play out that way. So it's not uncommon for somebody to have night terrors, for them to have other sleep-wake disorders whenever they have trauma or things like that that are disturbing them. An anniversary, sometimes people don't even realize it. It might be the anniversary of something that happened. December, I always feel a little down. Okay? A couple things, it's cold. I don't like the cold, so I feel sluggish. But it's also the anniversary of my father's death. Okay? So December's not really a great, especially the beginning of December, it's not a great month for me. So even though that's been 12 years since he passed, it's still something that mentally, physically, it sticks with me. Even if I don't remember here, my body remembers. Is that making sense? Does that help a little bit? Okay.
We're at a great time. It is 10:30, so we're going to take